They say power protects you. That if you build high enough walls, no one can see the cracks. But sometimes the most powerful men are the ones hiding the deepest wounds. When you picture Donald Trump, what comes to mind? A billionaire? A former president? A man who never backs down? Now pause and imagine this. A young boy in a towering mansion, gazing out the window, hoping for his father's attention and never quite getting it. Donald once said, "My father was tough, very tough. He expected a lot. But what he didn't say was how much it cost." Fred Trump Sr. didn't believe in softness. He believed in strength, in winning, in raising fighters, not feelers. And so, Donald learned early, don't cry, don't complain, don't get close, just win. It wasn't just advice, it was survival. Because Donald had seen what happened when someone showed weakness in that house. His older brother, Freddie, the fun one, the gentle one, was crushed by the pressure. He drank, he stumbled, and eventually he was gone. Donald never drank a drop after that. Not out of pride, but out of fear, out of grief, out of a vow, I'll never be like him. So he built armor, he raised skyscrapers, put his name on them, and learned to make the world look, but never see. But what if we did look? What if behind the headlines and controversies, there was still that little boy standing by the window, waiting for someone to ask, "Are you okay?" This is not about politics. It's not about opinion. It's about the part of Donald Trump few ever notice, but that shaped everything. Fred Trump Sr. didn't believe in kindness. He believed in control, in toughness, in raising killers, as he once said. And Donald, he was the chosen one, the fighter, the son meant to carry the family legacy, not question it. Every day, the lesson was simple. Love is conditional. Respect is earned by winning. Emotions, they were weakness, something to crush, not explore. Donald watched his older brother Freddie try to be different. Freddie smiled too much. He dreamed of flying planes, not building empires. And their father hated it, mocked it. Slowly, he broke him. Donald saw that. He saw what happened when you showed softness, and he made a silent vow. I'll never be like him. So, he became what his father wanted, hard, confident, untouchable. But not because he was born that way, because he had to be, because fear was always watching from across the dinner table. He learned to speak loud, to interrupt, to never admit doubt, to always win, even when losing. That wasn't arrogance, it was armor. You see, the man we saw on television, boasting, branding, battling, was once just a boy, trying to survive in a house where silence meant failure and feelings meant defeat. And maybe, just maybe, that boy never truly left. Freddie Trump was supposed to be the golden boy. He was charming, warm, and full of dreams. He didn't want to build empires, he wanted to fly planes. But in the Trump household, dreams weren't enough. And softness, it was punished. Their father, Fred Sr., saw Freddie's kindness as weakness. He mocked it, dismissed it, crushed it. And Donald, he watched. He watched his brother shrink under the pressure, turn to alcohol, lose his spirit, and then lose his life. Fred Trump Jr. died at just 42 years old from complications of alcoholism, a slow, silent collapse that left Donald with a wound he rarely talks about but never escaped. That's why Donald doesn't drink, doesn't smoke, never has. He once said, emphasis level moderates, I saw what alcohol did to my brother, I learned from it. But what he didn't say was how deeply it changed him. The fear of failure, the fear of losing control, the fear of ending up like Freddie. So he built walls, not just around buildings, but around himself. He stopped trusting softness, stopped entertaining doubt. He became the fighter, not to win, but to survive. And yet, behind every bold speech, every defiant tweet, every clash with the press, there's a man who still hears his brother's laughter, echoing in a place no one else can reach. Freddie's story didn't end with him. It became a compass, guiding Donald through a world he never felt truly safe in. And that's the kind of grief that doesn't shout, it shapes. To the public, Donald Trump was a symbol of success. Gold towers, private jets, a name that echoed through boardrooms and tabloids alike. But behind that image was a truth few dared to say out loud. He had failed, again and again. Trump hotels and casino resorts, Trump Airlines, Trump Vodka, Trump University. Each one launched with bold claims and collapsed under weight he couldn't carry. In total, 6 corporate bankruptcies. 6. And yet, he never once admitted defeat. Not publicly, not emotionally. Because to him, failure wasn't an option. Not because he didn't fail, but because he couldn't be seen failing. He was the boy who learned that weakness got punished. So when the numbers dropped, when investors pulled out, when headlines screamed, "Trump goes bankrupt," he smiled. He rebranded, he shifted the narrative, he pointed to the name on the building, not the cracks beneath. Some called it ego, some called it denial, but maybe it was survival. In the Trump world, image wasn't everything. It was the only thing. He once said, emphasis level moderate, sometimes by losing a battle, you find a new way to win the war. But what he never said was how much each loss left a scar. Every closed casino, every failed venture, every article that painted him as a joke. They didn't just hurt his brand, they threatened the story he'd spent a lifetime building, that he was invincible. And when that story cracked, he built it again. Bigger, louder, taller. Because sometimes, when your identity is wrapped in winning, the greatest fear isn't losing. It's being seen as someone who did. They say the higher you rise, the more eyes follow. And for Donald Trump, every spotlight cast a shadow. Even before stepping into the White House, his name had long been tangled in lawsuits, business disputes, contract conflicts, investigations that made headlines and enemies. But once he became president, the pressure tripled. He wasn't just a public figure. He was a legal battlefield. 2 impeachments, dozens of federal inquiries, ongoing charges tied to business records, and more lawsuits than most CEOs face in a lifetime. Each headline chipped away at the myth of the man who always wins, who never breaks. But this time, he couldn't just walk away. Courtrooms don't listen to branding, judges don't care for confidence, and legal pressure, it builds slowly until it explodes. Behind the defiance, behind the bold statements and raised fists, was a man fighting not just for reputation, but for identity. To lose a deal is one thing. To lose a narrative is a collapse far deeper. You see, when your image is your currency, every subpoena is a crack in the foundation. Every deposition, a threat to the empire built on certainty. He once said, "I like to fight back. I don't like to settle." But what happens when the fights outnumber the victories? When the noise never stops? Even for Donald Trump, a man known for relentless energy, the toll was real. And as the legal spotlight grew hotter, the weight of being Donald Trump grew heavier than ever. From the outside, the White House glows with power, red carpets, world leaders, flags that never fall. But on the inside, it can be the loneliest place on earth. Donald Trump entered it not just as a president, but as a performer, a man who had mastered the art of being watched. Yet in those long, silent corridors, without applause, without cameras, he was left with his own thoughts. And thoughts, can be the loudest sound of all. Staffers described mood swings. Allies came and went. Advisors tried to manage the narrative, but no one could manage the man. He sought loyalty, but rarely gave trust. He craved praise, but questioned everyone's motives. He was powerful, but often alone. At night, he would watch the news obsessively, reading every opinion, every headline, every attack. Some said he was thin-skinned, but maybe he was just tired of being misunderstood. When you're surrounded by portraits of history's greatest names and haunted by their judgment, it's easy to confuse control with connection. One former aide said he would light up at compliments like a child starved for approval. But no amount of power could fill the silence in that house. Because authority may echo down the halls, but it never hugs you back. So each morning, he'd put the armor back on, the suit, the confidence, the performance. But deep down, behind every headline and photo op, stood a man navigating the greatest stage of all, without a script. It's easy to judge from the headlines. They're loud, sharp, simple. But real people are never that simple. Donald Trump, for many, a name that sparks instant opinions. But what if we paused and looked past the noise? What if we saw not just the figure, but the formation behind it? The boy molded by a stern father, the brother marked by loss, the man who rose and fell, and rose again, because standing still meant being seen as weak. We don't have to agree with his choices. We don't have to admire his style, but we can choose to understand, because every strong front often hides a fragile truth, and every loud voice sometimes masks a quiet ache. There's humanity, even in controversy. There's pain behind the performance. And maybe, just maybe, the more we learn about someone's struggles, the less we're quick to label their story. He built towers, he chased applause, he fought battles, both seen and unseen. And like all of us, he wanted to matter. So the next time we hear the name, let's not just think of politics or personality. Let's remember, there's always more beneath the surface. Because behind every name is a person, and behind every person, a story waiting to be understood. In the end, what do we really remember about a person? Their power, their flaws, their victories? Or is it the silent parts, the things they never said but always carried? Donald Trump once said, "Emphasis level moderate, I don't smoke, I never have." But he didn't stop there. He added, "Because I watched my brother, Freddie, and I saw what it did to him." That's not a political statement. That's not bravado. That's a memory, a scar, a line drawn from love and loss. In a world obsessed with image, that single sentence reveals more than any speech ever could. Behind the business suits, behind the rally lights, behind the headlines, is a man who learned discipline through grief. Not because he wanted to, but because he had to. We often expect our public figures to be symbols, flawless, fearless, untouchable. But they're people, and like all people, they bleed, they bury, they remember. So what do we take from this story? Not admiration, not condemnation, but awareness. That pain shapes people, and behind even the most hardened expression might be a moment of heartbreak that changed everything. Break time point 5. You don't have to agree with someone to learn from them. You just have to be willing to look a little deeper.